Joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline, covers the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. He is Mike Kaye. Mike, are you interviewing for the Panthers job at any point this week?
I might try to get in as the permanent fullbacks coach, but I don't think – I don't know. That seems like a tall task for me.
Gotcha. I feel like Steve Wilks, the interim head coach who went 6-6 after Matt Rule got fired, is fighting an uphill battle because David Tepper, the owner of the Panthers, has it in his head what he wants. Because it's not lost on me that the interview list for the Panthers head coaching job, they're all offensive guys. Wilks is the one defensive guys. There's ways around that, obviously, but Tepper clearly has a type, if you will.
Yeah, I think if you're a former NFL quarterback turned offensive coordinator, clap your hands. Like, that's basically what the Carolina Panthers are saying. Now, in one respect, you could say, hey, they're being respectful to Steve Wilks and not interviewing other defensive guys, so they're not diminishing the fact that, hey, he's a special case, right? But I think when you look at what Tepper wants to create in Carolina, he wants a really explosive offense. And typically that's led to success in the NFL. The issue with that is there's a major boom and bust factor. When you're a really good play caller, especially a young one, like a lot of these guys, they're first or second year play callers, and then you get the added responsibilities of being a head coach, that can be kind of crippling. There are guys who are just meant to be play callers. There are guys who are just meant to be CEO head coaches. Not everybody's an Andy Reid, So I think that's a concern here. This list is impressive on paper, but you don't know until you know. I, for one, was a huge advocate of Nate Hackett, a guy I covered in Jacksonville for a few years, and we saw how that went. So I think we need to look at this in the scope of the guy you know versus the guy you don't. Mm-hmm. And experience, even as limited of experience as Wilks has as a head coach, versus the boomer bust.
Mike Kaye covers the Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. He's joining us here on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. That's Joe Ovies. I'm Joe Giglio. All right, let's go through a couple of these names here, Mike. I'm curious because I look at the Eagles. I see their success with Jalen Hurts. My brain says that's Nick Sirianni. That's Jalen Hurts. But Shane Steichen is a play caller. I don't know if he calls the plays or not. He's the OC for the Eagles. Tell us a little bit about Steichen.
So, background on me, I covered the Eagles for the last 4 years. I covered the first year of the Sirianni regime. So Nick comes in. He's never been a play caller, but he takes on that responsibility along with being head coach for the first time. The first 8 weeks are a slog. He realizes, you know what? Maybe I should just be a CEO head coach. He passes the baton of play calling to Shane Steichen. The Eagles immediately become the best running team in the NFL. Like, you saw how the Panthers were in the last 11 games of this season. The Eagles were that as a unit on, basically a rocket ship by comparison. So he adapted to Jalen Hurts. He was able to work with Brian Johnson, their extremely talented quarterbacks coach, who is going to get offensive coordinator looks this year. I wouldn't be shocked if he even got some head coaching interest as well. And they really have flipped the script this year. Instead of being a running juggernaut, they've been a passing juggernaut because of the QB maker, A.J. Brown, and the fact that Devontae Smith has elevated his game as well. They've really put Jalen Hurts in position to succeed. Now you say, okay, Jalen Hurts is a bit of a unicorn. Well, prior to landing in Philadelphia, guess who Justin Herbert's rookie year offensive coordinator was? Oh, it's Shane Steichen. So he's worked with two very talented young quarterbacks. On top of that, he's only 37, but he was Phillip Rivers' quarterbacks coach for several years. A former quarterback himself, he played at UNLV. He's a guy who has a really calm exterior. He's not a rah-rah guy in the slightest. He kind of looks like Dax. Is it Dax Shepard, the guy who's married to Kristen Bell? Looks like almost identical to him. He's very relatable. You bring up scheme. He's a guy who is known for being pretty forward-thinking when it comes to scheme. He adapts to his players. He's developed into a pretty solid play caller. I mean, there was the Chicago game where they basically used Jalen Hurts as a battering ram, a human battering ram, and then he injured his shoulder. And Eagles fans are pretty incensed about that. But for the most part, I think he's been very consistent, and he's a guy who makes a lot of sense for this team, especially from his temperament. His temperament definitely fits the Carolinas.
Mike Kaye joining us, covers the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovies. He's on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. All right, about that temperament, this gets us back to the start of the conversation with Steve Wilks. I mean, look, I'm in Raleigh. You know, I can only pick up on what's going on with the Panthers through what you're talking about, other people around the team.
Sure.
And the sense that I get is that Wilks does have the temperament for this job, that the players do buy in to what he is selling. Even the town buys in to what he's selling. The Panthers went from, as I've described, an unserious franchise with Matt Rule over the last 2 years to one that you at least have to pay attention to because they might actually go win the damn thing. This has to count for something, right? Like, it's to me, Tepper put himself in a bad spot by saying during the Matt Rule firing press conference that he had to do this incredible job or an extraordinary job. Well, he did, given the context. So how can you not take him seriously as a candidate at this point?
So I think you've got a really good grasp of the situation. But what I would say is this. I think people are missing the forest for the trees in the bad wording of David Tepper. What he also said was he was concerned about getting over the hump. Mm-hmm. And he said it multiple times. And then he defined getting over the hump as showing tangible growth as an organization, winning more than the year before, etc. Well, guess what? Steve Wilks did all of that by definition. So I think when you look at this situation, in some ways it's a good problem to have. In other ways, I think Tepper's going to look at the last 2 games and some of the quirks of the time management and say, hey, look at that. He's not perfect. But I do think when you look at what Steve Wilks has done with having Robbie Anderson shipped off immediately, with having Christian McCaffrey shipped off immediately, his starting center goes down and, oh, wait, there's a better starting center awaiting him. The fact that they averaged over 150 yards rushing per game, even with blips against the Steelers and the Ravens. I just like, to me, there's like this polarizing argument about Steve Wilks that I kind of don't understand. Mm-hmm. So he is a defensive coach. He is an interim head coach. There are stigmas that come with both.
Now, and he's black, Mike. Like, I'll just go ahead and say it. Like, and that's fine. I mean, I do think that's part of the conversation, and there is something to be said about the fact that he's part of that lawsuit with Brian Flores.
Yeah, if you don't think the league would do a silent hallelujah if he was hired, I think is completely missing part of the point. But what I would say is this: if you see that all these candidates are young former quarterbacks who, except for Frank Reich and Jim Caldwell, who have experience with working with a quarterback, well, what do? Well, you go to a young, up-and-coming coach who has some coordinator experience, who was a former quarterback, and make him your offensive coordinator. Now, I talked about a guy named Brian Johnson. He was the offensive coordinator at Florida when Kyle Pitts was there. That offense was pretty impressive. Him leaving probably cost his former boss's job there. He's worked with Jalen Hurts. He's done a pretty good job there. He played at Utah, was the Sugar Bowl MVP after replacing Alex Smith. He was on the cover of NCAA back in the day, if you don't remember. So if you're Steve Wilks, you pitch somebody like that, or maybe somebody like Frank Reich, where he runs the offense and you run the defense and everybody just has fun. I think that there are a lot of options here. And I think the people that are immediately running to, wow, Steve Wilks has no shot, I think it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. As plugged in as I might be, even I don't know what's going into his pitch. So I will say there is interest in Brian Johnson on the Wilks side. I do think that he is a guy who makes a lot of sense there, but I also think he can be creative in other facets. I think Jeff Nixon's a guy who's very interesting as well.
I was going to say, Mike, please tell me Steve Wilks isn't meeting with David Tepper today and saying, Ben McAdoo is going to be my play caller.
I would be astonished if that was the thing. Now, maybe he says, you know what, but I like what Ben McAdoo's done, and I think he could be a really good quarterbacks coach. There is history there where he has been very good with quarterbacks. I just think it's a matter of what you prioritize, right? Like Chris Tabor, in my opinion, is a top 3 special teams coach. All of his specialists set records or led the league in something. Sam Franklin's become a really good guy. I think there are people on the staff that Wilks would like to retain. But look, we learned this in Philadelphia with Doug Peterson. He pitched the wrong staff and then got axed, a couple of years after winning the Super Bowl. So owners are fickle. They don't like to be told what to do. I know a lot of people in the media are pushing Steve, but ultimately this comes down to an audience of one.
And Nicole. Don't forget Nicole.
She's
part of this
Nicole,
too.
yeah. People are making a big deal out of that.
I'm just making a joke. I know it's not
that
big of a deal.
I know, but I've seen it a lot, and I'm kind of like, it's not that uncommon.
No, it's not. I think people are just looking for reasons to believe that David Tepper won't make the right call. I mean, we don't need to add to it. Mike Kaye covers the Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. Hey, man, we appreciate it. Have fun the rest of the week going through all this coaching hiring process, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.